as you know, we've got some fights coming up on our hands in the next several years. We've got Trump, we got the Republicans, we've got corporate Democrats who are holding us back, and we've got the corporations behind all of that, and the corporate interests, oligarchical interests behind all of that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to our next guest, because I think he's going to be an important part of that, as he has been in the past. Mike Papantonio is an attorney. He's the past president of the National Trial Lawyers Association. He's in the Trial Lawyer Hall of Fame. He's a senior partner of Levin Papantonio, which does plaintiff's law work. They've handled mass tort cases on pharmaceuticals, asbestos, breast implants, factory farming, securities fraud, you name it, tobacco, whatever. And he also has a new program. He does radio work, but he also has a new program on RT called America's Lawyer. So first of all, Mike, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Richard.
Well, you bet. And let me ask, first of all, congratulations on the new show. I think it's been, what, maybe 5-6 weeks now?
Yeah, we're in the fifth week, was on last night, as a matter of fact.
All right, so what was the thinking behind this show, an America's Lawyer show?
Well, the problem with what's happened with corporate media, as you've talked about so many times and you've written about so many times, is corporate media can no longer tell the story that their advertisers disagree with. For example, America's Lawyer, last night we talked about something called C8, which is a product that's killing people along the Ohio Valley. DuPont makes the product, so the advertisers, the people running the advertising business, the guy on the 50th floor that brings in the advertising money, he won't let their station or this ABC or CBS or NBC, they can't do a story like that because the advertisers order them not to. It's the truest form of propaganda. You have a media that's become brain dead because of the money that's been coming through. As a matter of fact, if you follow this, I've done Fox, I've been a contributor, regular contributor on Fox, regular contributor on MSNBC, CNN, I've done them all. And I've actually, Richard, gone to them many times with stories where you have a product that has the potential to kill thousands of people. And you say, gee, you need to do this story. But Pfizer or Merck or Johnson & Johnson makes the product. And so some cat on the 50th floor with his abacus determines that he can't do that story, even though human life is at risk. The advantage of doing RT America is they don't think like that. They've never, I've been a contributor with them for years, and I've never one time been told what I can and can't say. And they don't have advertisers ordering them around like a red-headed stepchild. That's the problem with MSNBC. I did MSNBC for a while, and the problem is you've got Phil Griffin there, who is always there just by the skin of his teeth. I mean, he's always likely to lose his job. And so a guy in that position can't take any kind of risk. And so if Pfizer calls and says, don't let Papantonio do that show, he's not going to let him do the segment.
This gets to something that I was going to get to it a little later, but let's get to it now, which is the fact that your show's on RT. I appear on RT fairly often. I was on MSNBC, but the word came down, don't bring that guy back. So, I get, once in a while, you hear people say, well, RT, so you're doing Putin's bidding. You get that comment from the same people who think it's fine, who thought it was fine to go on MSNBC and do General Electric's bidding when General Electric is one of the worst actors in corporate America. So I guess the question is, who's pure in all of this, and isn't it really about going where you can tell your story?
Well, journalism, investigative journalism is dead in the United States. That's not an overstatement at all. Fortunately, you have a few, you've got Vice Network that's coming out there. You've got still people like you. You've got Tom Hartman, Ed Schultz. You've got some great people out there telling stories. But the thing that is so painful to watch for me is because I started this all the way back to Air America. I worked with Rachel Maddow and a lot of the folks that MSNBC, brings in from time to time. And it's very disturbing to see how they've turned the corner, how money has made them turn the corner, how demands by advertisers don't allow them to tell the stories that they want to tell. RT, the idea of them being criticized of propaganda is so absurd. Did they hack the DNC? Yes, I believe they did. Did Putin sit in his office and do that? No. Does America do that, and have they done that for generations? According to Howard Zinn, Chalmers Johnson, some of the greatest writers about empire building, they say we've not only been doing that, we have been all the way back to Allende and in that election where we actually killed Allende because Pinochet was the better choice. So we don't just hack, we have a history of not just hacking elections. We actually have hands-on murder where it comes to taking over control of government. So this is a ridiculous argument when you put it in perspective. Did it happen? Probably. Did it affect the election? No. Hillary was a bad choice, and the Democrats have become the party of Martha's Vineyard rather than the party of Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's why they lost. They'll lose with Hillary every single time.
Well, and they'll lose with Hillary's ideology every time, Pap. And that's another thing that I think is important to say. Everybody wants to blame first of all, it was all Comey's fault. Then it was all Russia's fault. Then it was never the Democrats' fault. But I'll tell you what, Democrats only have 18 out of 51 governorships. They didn't hack the other two-thirds of the governors. They didn't hack the legislature races all around the country that Democrats are losing. They didn't hack Congress in 2010 when the Democrats went from holding all three houses, all three branches of federal government to eventually losing all three. You can't blame this all on Comey. You can't blame this. At some point, you got to look back and say, you know what? The story we're telling, the policies we were proposing do not speak to the needs and concerns of the majority of the American people, which is why half of them don't vote, and the ones that do vote don't turn out for us.
Yeah, what's happened is it's become, we hear about the fight between RT, and the fight with RT is really between the DNC. The DNC have their fingers in so many parts of establishment government because Obama has been there for 8 years. So they have the ear of a lot of people, both in corporate media. I mean, why do you think, for example, that MSNBC every day hammered on the Russia story and continues to do that? Comcast owns them. Why do you think that, as you're really being objective about this, why do we see so much control coming from corporate media? Because the Democratic Party has allowed that to happen. It started with all the way back to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton wanted to change the nature of the Democratic Party, and he created this Frankenstein monster. And the last thing they unleashed on us was Hillary Clinton. They will not win again. I called, I'm not sitting here bragging, but Ring of Fire called this election back in February. And the reason we called it was because there was such tone deaf by the Democrats. And it wasn't, you saw what I call the Hillary bots that simply could not get they could not get by the idea that the Clintons are passé. The Clintons are yesterday's news. The Clintons are not what America's looking for. You had a party, Richard, that developed into, from an elitist standpoint, they talked great about social issues. They could hang with social issues like gender or race. They could hang with all that. But where it came to understanding that you can't have this alliance with Wall Street, you can't have this alliance with corporate America that sends jobs out of the country. You can't have this alliance that works against the best interest of middle America between Martha's Vineyard and Hollywood. All of that in between matters. And this party that's become clearly, when I say the party of Martha's Vineyard, I really do mean that. Richard, they still don't know what happened to them. They still don't know. That's why we got Pelosi appointed. That's why we got Schumer appointed. That's why Hillary Clinton's getting ready to run for mayor of New York. They still don't get it. And the hatred This is the thing most bothers, the hatred that comes from these rank and file progressives when we try to talk about issues like this is amazing. They sound like right-wing neo-nuts on steroids because
Right, and let me just jump in for a second there. And again, we're talking with Mike Papantonio, who's a host of the program America's Lawyer. But and the other piece of this, and this is what really bugs me. Yeah, no, I don't want anybody interfering with an election. But you get, Paul Begala was on Twitter the other day saying, well, why did they, BuzzFeed published this stuff about Trump, but they shouldn't have. And so, but what about? He was saying, what about the fact that everybody published this quote-unquote stolen material from the DNC, meaning the emails? It's like, you ran an entire campaign based on a stolen video from Entertainment Tonight with Donald Trump in it. Right. So it's like, at what point do you say, well, hold on here. If you're against stolen material, be consistent. Be for stolen material or against stolen material, but you can't be both. And by the way, follow through on your logic. Are you saying that the newspapers and broadcasters in this country should not have published the DNC emails? Because if you're saying that, you're for the suppression of information. So come on out and say, are you for suppressing information or releasing it once it becomes public knowledge?
Richard, what's evolved, and I know you've probably covered the story, or you will if you haven't, while we were sleeping 2 nights before Christmas, Obama signed into the Defense Authorization Act something that's called 2349. It's Section 2349. Most people, if you line up 1,000 people in a room, they've never even heard of this. But what he did is he gave the Department of Defense authority and funding to create a propaganda ministry. That's what he did.
Absolutely.
So the propaganda ministry, let's say, Richard, you say something that the propaganda ministry gatekeeper disagrees with. They then go to somebody like the Washington Post, who I don't know that they've done this with the Washington Post, but they're very high on my suspect list and will continue to be. But they'll go to somebody like the Washington Post or BuzzFeed, whatever it may be, and they'll pay them to create propaganda against you because you created a story that they didn't like. Now, America is asleep at this. Do you realize I haven't seen one story come out of corporate media about this? Why? Because corporate media is they want to be part of that. They want to be part of the propaganda that Obama said is, this is understand, Obama is a constitutional law professor, and he allowed this to happen. Not only did he allow it to happen, he actually generated it. Why was it generated? It was generated primarily because of RT Network. They're afraid of RT Network. You've got an entire media monster that is afraid of RT Network, because RT Network have a penetration of 890 million people. My show, for example, is shown all over the world, every English-speaking country. So I'm able to talk about Pfizer or DuPont or Dow Chemical or name it. I'm able to talk about the bad guys. You tell me one other place that you can think of on electric television media where there is such a show. I don't know of one.
Well, it's interesting. It gets to another point. Now, I'm not, if Russia was hacking voting machines and so on, I would want to know about that.
Me too.
And I'll tell you what, if the Koch brothers were hacking voting machines, I would want to know about it too, because I believe in democracy. But, 2 things bothered me. One was that this report, this intelligence report that came out last week, was mostly about RT and the fact that RT talked about the Occupy movement or drones.
Or fracking. You understand, they were down on RT because RT talked about the problems with fracking in the United States. They were down on RT because RT talked about corporate misfeasance and malfeasance and criminal corruption on Wall Street. They were down on that in the way these idiots. By the way, this thing was not written by the government. I can promise you. This is written by a PR firm. It's written like a sophomoric approach to analysis. This is written by a PR firm. It was not written by the government. I can promise you that. But the way that they landed was RT is bad because they're telling stories that we don't like. which
Right.
ties into my story about the 2349, the propaganda ministry that Obama signed into. And so, look, you see where this is headed, don't you? I mean, you see this train wreck of First Amendment that's taking place, that now Obama handed that to Trump. And Obama is leaving office as all these positive, oh, he's a wonderful president, he's wonderful. Nonsense. He was an awful president when you really analyze what the guy has done. And he did a couple of great things, but when you analyze where did he take us, the last thing he did for his legacy was sign 2349, where we now have a propaganda ministry that's run by the Department of Defense that has a $60 million budget just for starters.
Right. And, you know, my big fear, and we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately, but Mike Papantonio, my big fear is that eventually we're going to have a situation where everybody, I hate Trump, but where everybody demonizes Trump so much that they feel they get a kind of cheap grace, and they no longer have to, if they're journalists, tell the truth, or if they're Democrats, have to represent the people. And I think that would be a disastrous outcome, because I think we're going to have 50 years of Trumpism if we go in that direction.
No question. No question.
All right. So we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. A lot of other things I'd love to talk to you about. But Mike Papantonio, thanks for coming on the show. Congratulations on the program, America's Lawyer, and all the best.
Thank you, RJ.